would you say is one of the biggest reasons people ask for prayer? Take a moment and think about it. I would say it's a toss-up between finances and health. Both are pressing issues, don't you think? In fact, I can guarantee that when prayer lines are open, a significant portion of the requests are about healing. But why is that? Why are so many people struggling with their health? Could it be the aftermath of the fall of mankind, or is there something more at play here? In the Bible, people often associate sickness with a curse. In Deuteronomy 28, God outlines the curses that will come upon the Israelites if they turn away from his commands. These curses included not only physical plagues and diseases, but also a general sense of spiritual and relational separation from God. But thank God the story doesn't end there. In Galatians 3:13-14, the Bible tells us, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. Jesus' sacrifice on the cross made it possible for us to receive the blessings promised to Abraham. Blessings of health, prosperity, and spiritual wholeness. So if Jesus had already paid the price to break the curse, why would we settle for living under it? Why not walk in the fullness of God's blessings available to us? John 10:10 says, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. That means Satan's job is to make sure we don't walk in the fullness of what God has promised us. And let me tell you, he has been doing an excellent job with his most subtle weapon, food. Hi, I'm Shirley Griffith. Welcome to Let's Talk Health. Today we are diving into Satan's secret weapon, food. Stay tuned because you don't want to miss this. When you think about it, Satan's strategy hasn't changed much since the beginning of time, yet it remains incredibly effective. In fact, his tactics are so subtle and deceptive that they often go unnoticed. From the very first temptation in the Garden of Eden, Satan used food as a tool to derail humanity. In Genesis 3, we see how subtle yet calculated his approach was. God had generously provided Adam and Eve with every tree in the garden, filled with good and nourishing fruit for their enjoyment and sustenance. Genesis 2:16. They were surrounded by abundance. Yet there was one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that God had explicitly forbidden them to eat from. Satan zeroed in on this restriction, using it to plant doubt in Eve's mind. He asked, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Genesis 3:1. This question twisted God's words, making his command seem unnecessarily restrictive rather than protective. Satan's strategy was clear: distort God's truth to make him appear withholding and unreasonable. Next, Satan made the forbidden fruit look irresistibly attractive. When Eve looked at it, she saw that it was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom. Genesis 3:6. The fruit wasn't just appealing to her physical hunger, but to her pride and curiosity. It seemed to offer something beyond what God had already provided, something she didn't think she could get otherwise. Finally, Satan attacked God's wisdom and authority, directly contradicting him by saying, you would not certainly die, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Genesis 3:4-5. He implied that God was withholding something good from her, feeding into the lie that she could achieve more on her terms. The result? Eve chose to trust the deceiver over the Creator. She took and ate the fruit, giving some to Adam, and in doing so, sin entered the world, along with death and separation from God. Satan's tactic wasn't just about offering food, it was about undermining God's provision, distorting his command, and appealing to human pride. The story of Esau giving up his birthright for a bowl of stew, Genesis 25:29-34, reveals another instance of how Satan uses food as a tool for destruction. Let's unpack this story further. Esau was the firstborn son of Isaac and Rebekah, which meant he held the birthright, a position of honor and privilege in his family. The birthright entitled him to a double portion of his father's inheritance and the spiritual leadership of his family lineage. This was a sacred gift tied to God's covenant and promises. However, Esau traded his immense blessing for a bowl of lentil stew in a moment of weakness and hunger. Now, how could this happen? Esau came in from the field hungry, Genesis 25:29. Hunger, a basic need, made him vulnerable. Moments of physical weakness, hunger, fatigue, stress, often cloud our judgment and stir people away from what truly matters. When Esau saw the stew Jacob was cooking, he said, "Quick, let me have some of that rice stew. I am famished." Genesis 25:30. His hunger dominated his thinking, making his immediate desires seem more urgent than the long-term value of his birthright. Esau declared, "I'm about to die. What good is this birthright to me?" Genesis 25:32. Was Esau truly at the brink of death from hunger? Likely not. But Satan capitalized on his impulsiveness, convincing him that his temporary hunger was a life or death situation. Satan magnified his temporary discomfort to justify poor decisions. Now Jacob, who was preparing the stew, seized the opportunity to bargain, demanding Esau's birthright in exchange. Esau, driven by his immediate craving, agreed without hesitation. He sacrificed a lifelong blessing for momentary satisfaction. Satan made short-term pleasures seem more valuable than long-term rewards. By choosing food over his birthright, Esau revealed how little he valued the sacred gift God had given him. Satan subtly eroded Esau's perception of birthright's importance, making it seem insignificant compared to a bowl of stew. The result, Esau ate, drank, and left despising his birthright. Genesis 25:34. His decision showed a lack of self-control and marked a spiritual failure. Later in Hebrews 12:16-17, Esau is described as godless for trading his birthright for a single meal, and he was unable to undo the consequences of his choice. Now, what do we notice about Esau that might explain why he was described as godless? He lacked self-control, giving in to his hunger without considering the cost. Proverbs 25:28 compares a person without self-control to a city with broken walls, exposed and vulnerable. He didn't value the inheritance he had been given, dismissing everything of great significance for immediate satisfaction. Esau lived in the moment, focusing only on what he felt he needed, neglecting the weight of future responsibilities and blessings tied to his decision. He let his emotions lead, allowing the urgency of the moment to cloud his judgment instead of seeking clarity or wisdom. Though he later regretted his choice, his sorrow did not lead to a change of heart. So we look at two instances in the Bible where individuals were tempted by food and fell into temptation. Now you want to explore an example where someone faced a food temptation and actually responded wisely. Daniel 1 8-16 offers a powerful lesson in resisting temptation and standing firm in one's conviction. Now, Daniel and other young men from Judah were taken into Babylonian captivity. King Nebuchadnezzar ordered these captives to be trained in the ways of the Babylonian so they can serve in his court. The king assigned them daily portions of his royal food and wine, all part of their preparation. This was meant to ensure they were well nourished and strong for their service. However, Daniel faced a dilemma. The food and wine from the king's table likely violated Jewish dietary laws. It may have included unclean foods forbidden by the Torah, Leviticus 11, or it could have been sacrificed to idols, making it spiritually defiled. Accepting the king's food would mean compromising his faith and disobeying God's command. Now let's dig a little further into the temptation Daniel faced. Eating from the king's table was actually a privilege, signifying favor and high status. Refusing it could have been seen as disrespectful or rebellious. This opportunity could have also been viewed as a step up in life for a captive in a foreign land. Daniel probably had a lot of peer pressure, because he wasn't alone. Other young men from Judah were in the same situation. They may have been pressured to conform, as refusing the king's food could draw negative attention or alienate him from his peers. Now, defying the king's order could lead to severe punishment, possibly even death. Daniel risked his future and safety by rejecting what was offered. Despite the temptation, Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or the wine that he drank. Daniel 1:8. His decision was a deliberate act of obedience to God, prioritizing his faith over personal safety or social acceptance. Daniel respectfully requested permission from the chief eunuch to abstain from the king's food. His approach showed wisdom. He did not rebel, but saw an alternative solution aligned with his faith. Now he trusted God's way, even when it seemed risky or unconventional. For Daniel, faith wasn't just believing, it was doing. It was stepping out, even when others hesitated, knowing God's promises would deliver. Now, Daniel was really bold. He proposed a test. He and his friends would eat only vegetables and drink water for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, can you guess what happened? Daniel and his friends appear healthier and better nourished than those who ate the king's food. Their obedience to God brought not only physical well-being, but also divine favor. They excelled in wisdom and understanding, surpassing all the king's other advisors. Daniel 1, 17-20. Their faithfulness became a testimony of God's power and provision in a foreign land. Quiet obedience turned into a loud declaration of God's faithfulness, and everyone around them noticed. We spend a lot of time focusing on how Satan operated within the Bible. Fast forward to today, and the same strategy that began in the Garden of Eden is still in play. Satan is using food to tempt, trap, and control. What started with a seemingly helpless piece of fruit in the garden has evolved into a massive global crisis, one that is deeply embedded in our modern life. Today, food is no longer just about nourishment. It has become a source of temptation, overindulgence, and addiction. And the consequences are both far-reaching and painful. In our fast-paced, convenience-driven world, food is everywhere. Sugary snacks, processed meals, and high-calorie options are advertised at every turn. They're easy to grab, cheap to buy, and often taste incredible. We all have been there, right? That moment when a sugary snack seemed like the perfect answer to a stressful day, or just when fast food is easier than cooking at home. The results of this overconsumption are undeniable. According to the World Health Organization, 1 in 8 persons worldwide are living with obesity, and 2.5 billion adults are overweight. These numbers aren't just statistics, they reflect how our daily choices affect our health. The constant stress, sedentary habits, and the easy access to unhealthy food combine to create a perfect storm affecting millions of lives. Obesity isn't just about appearance, it's a precursor to so many serious health problems, including heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. And as our global waistline expands, so do the cases of diabetes. A recent study published in The Lancet found that over 800 million adults globally now have diabetes, nearly double previous estimates. These staggering figures should be a wake-up call, urging us to rethink our approach to health, food, and our lifestyle choices. Food has become central to so many of our important moments. Food is always a centerpiece, whether it's family gathering, birthdays, holidays, or even just a Friday night in. But sometimes these cultural focus on food can lead to overeating. We build an environment where eating isn't just necessary, it's part of the tradition. And that tradition often comes with extra servings, indulgences, and a general disregard for our health. It's essential to recognize the food industry role in all of this. With billions of dollars spent on advertising and research, the food industry have mastered the art of making food that are difficult to resist. These foods are deliberately designed to trigger the pleasure centers in our brain. The more sugar, fat, and salt they contain, the more we crave them. It's a science, and one that keeps us coming back for more, often without even realizing it. But the issue goes beyond food itself. Our lifestyle has changed dramatically over the years. We are more sedentary than ever before, spending hours sitting at desks, looking at screens, and not getting the physical exercise our bodies were designed for. Meanwhile, ultra-processed foods have become the norm rather than the exception. This combination of poor eating and lack of movement have created an environment where addiction can easily take hold. Looking back, we once had a much deeper respect for the health principles surrounding food. Food was not simply a source of sustenance. In many cultures, it was seen as medicine, a tool for healing, nourishment, and a way to care for our bodies. For generations, people ate with intention, choosing wise, fresh food to fuel their bodies. There was a recognition that food was not just about satisfying hunger, but about honoring the connection between our health and our Creator. For centuries, the Bible provided clear, intentional guidance on approaching food, not just what to eat, but how, when, and why we eat. These principles were designed to honor God, nourish our bodies, and align our physical health with spiritual well-being. The dietary laws outlined in Leviticus are crucial to the biblical guidelines for maintaining physical, spiritual, and community health. In Leviticus, God provides the Israelites with specific instructions on what to eat and avoid, shaping how they will live and worship as people set apart for Him. God distinguishes between clean and unclean animals. Clean animals were considered fit for consumption, while unclean animals were not to be eaten. The distinction was based on both the type of animal and the characteristics. For land animals, the criteria were simple. Animals that chew cud and split hooves were clean. These include animals like cow, sheep, and goats. These animals were considered suitable for consumption because they were believed to be more wholesome and easier to digest. In contrast, unclean land animals such as pigs, which do not chew cud, rabbits, and camels were prohibited. The reasoning behind these restrictions may have been related to hygiene and health, as these animals often carry diseases and are more likely to contaminate food supplies. For sea animals, only those that had fins and scales were clean. This meant that fish like salmon and trout were acceptable, while shellfish, crustaceans, and other marine animals without these features were considered unclean. The restrictions on eating shellfish and other bottom-dwelling creatures may have been linked to their role in the ecosystem as scavengers, often carrying bacteria or parasites that could affect human health. Birds of prey such as eagles, vultures, and owls were considered unclean. This category may have been based on the fact that these birds consume clean animals and carrions, which was seen as unclean. On the other hand, birds like chicken, doves, and quail were considered clean, as they did not prey on different animals and had a pure diet. Additionally, creatures like bats, reptiles, insects, except locusts, were deemed unclean. This may have been due to their association with disease or impurity, and many of these creatures were linked to unsanitary living conditions or carry pathogens that could harm human health. Alongside dietary restriction, the Bible also encourages practices like fasting and feasting, which were vital to the spiritual health of the Israelites. Fasting was an act of humility and dependence on God, used to seek guidance, repent, and refocus on Him. In contrast, feasting was a time of joy and celebration, often in remembrance of God's faithfulness. These practices help the people of Israel maintain balance in their spiritual and physical life, reminding them that while food is essential, God is the true sustainer. God never meant food to be our enemy, but it's easy for it to take control in today's world. The temptation to indulge, eating for pleasure rather than nourishment, has become a part of our everyday life. Unfortunately, this shift has come with significant consequences: physical health issues, emotional struggle, and spiritual disconnect. When we move away from God's design for food, we risk falling into a pattern of addiction where food becomes our comfort, our idol, and our coping mechanism. As we have seen before, Satan has always used food as a strategy to distract and deceive. From the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden to the indulgent table of the king in Daniel 1, the enemy tempts us to focus on what God said no to, making us question His intention. But God's restrictions aren't about withholding, they are about protecting. When Daniel and his friends refused the king's rich food and chose vegetables and water, their choice wasn't just about diet, but faith and obedience. They trusted that God's way was better, even if it seemed simple or restrictive. The result? They were healthier, wiser, and more favored than those who indulged in the king's feast. The dietary laws in Leviticus weren't random, they were God's blueprint for living well, physically and spiritually. When the Israelites followed them, they honored God and showcased His wisdom to the nations around them. Today, we face similar choices. The world tempts us with processed food, overindulgence, and unhealthy habits, all cleverly disguised as harmless or desirable. But obedience to God's principles for health sets us apart and point others to His truth. Remember, God knows it's always for our protection. Obedience brings blessing, health, wisdom, and favor. Living God's way reflects His wisdom to the world. When we trust God's design, even in what we eat, we free ourselves from the trap of modern culture and walk in the freedom and vitality He intended. Our choice should testify of the goodness of doing it God's way. The good news, change is possible. We can return to the health principle we have lost. We can make mindful choices that honor our bodies, seek nourishment rather than indulgence, and take control of our health before the temptation traps us further. It's about recognizing that food was always meant to sustain us, not control us. And with God's wisdom, we can restore that balance.